He said, and now I'm quoting him, referring to the UN resolutions, he said, although they're paper resolutions, for Palestinians as a people, they represent the only international guarantees that our claims will not be ignored. Some of you know that about a half year ago, some papers were released on the negotiations that went on between Israel and the Palestinians between 1999 and 2009. They came to be called the Palestine Papers. It's a very voluminous file that runs to about between 10 and 15,000 pages. I plowed through them this summer, and it was very striking reading them. The Palestinians recognized the only leg they had to stand on against the formidable power of Israel backed by the United States. Over and over again, they kept referring to what they called international law, international legitimacy. And what did the Israelis say? Well, the foreign minister of Israel at the time, Tzipi Livni, she's now the leader of the main opposition party, the Kadima, she said as follows: I am a lawyer, but I am against law, international law in particular. Now, it might be accurately said that Livni was against international law because she was a lawyer, because she understood as a lawyer exactly where the international law was leading. And it was leading to an Israeli political defeat on all of what are called the fundamental questions of the Israel-Palestine conflict. The law is just not ambiguous. You know lawyers. Lawyers can make night, day, black, white. They can do anything. They really can. Evil people. Even though I like my lawyer. But in general, we can say there's a generalization. It's not stereotypical to say lawyers are evil. They just are. But here's the interesting but. On the key questions of the Israel-Palestine conflict, borders, settlements, Jerusalem, refugees, try as you may and do as you do, they can't do anything with it. Because the law is so straightforward and so uncontroversial. All 15 judges on that International Court of Justice who probably don't even agree on when to start their sessions each day. But of this, it's not controversial. And so Livni, I think with a certain amount of candor, she says, as a lawyer, I'm against the law, in particular international law, because she knew exactly where it went. The whole case collapses. The law is important, and unfortunately some people, I think, tend to be too skeptical about it. What about the position of the U.S. government? Well, Mr. Obama, in May 2011, he put forth a major policy statement. And the policy statement said he wanted a two-state settlement, fair enough, on the June 67 lines, meaning not the West Bank, Gaza, or East Jerusalem. But then he said there have to be, and I'm quoting him, mutually agreed land swaps. Mutually agreed. And then a few days later, he went to the convention of the American Israel Lobby, AIPAC, and he said, the parties themselves, Israelis and Palestinians, will negotiate a border that is different than the one that existed in June 1967, a border that takes into account the changes that have taken place in the last 44 years, including the new demographic realities on the ground. doesn't make any sense. Why does Israel get a say on where the Palestinian border is? Do Palestinians get a say on where Israel's border is? They had to recognize the state of Israel on the June 67 border. But why do the Israelis have to agree to what the border will be of the Palestinian state? That's just a recipe for internal negotiations. The Palestinians say, we want our border here. The Israelis say, no, we want your border here. And then what happens? If you don't have the law as the standard to say the Palestinian border is in accordance with international law, the Israeli proposed border is not in accordance with international law, and therefore it must be the Palestinian border. If you don't use the law as your standard, negotiations will go on through eternity. Now that's not speculation. That's the whole history of the peace process. If you look at the record, you go through it, what does the record show? Palestinians say, and I'll get to it in a moment, we're willing to give you about 1.5% of the West Bank in exchange for some Israeli land. The Israelis say, no, we want to keep about 9% of the West Bank. And we want to keep what are called the settlement blocks. But if they keep these settlement blocks, there's no Palestinian state left. And that's been in negotiations for 10 years. So effectively, the formula that Mr. Obama puts forth is one that will allow the allow the Israelis to veto not just the Palestinian proposal, but to veto international law. It has to be agreed to by them. Does that mean there can't be any land swaps? No, there can be, and I'll get to that in a moment. But the Palestinians have to be persuaded. You don't get a veto over their border. The law is the law. The whole of the West Bank, as the International Court of Justice put it, including East Jerusalem and Gaza, are occupied Palestinian territory. That's the picture. Now, there have been many objections put forth to that picture. I want to just look in the time that remains at two of them. Number one, the objection which has become very popular lately, put forth by Mr. Netanyahu, that a condition for resolving the conflict must be that Palestinians recognize Israel as a Jewish state or the state of the Jewish people. That's the condition. It started around 2007, but Netanyahu has articulated it with a great deal of force. He says that the Palestinians have to recognize the right of the Jewish people to a state of their own in this land. They have to